Hi folks, this is Jay. Hope you're okay today. It's good to see you. Just making a video concerning 10 reasons why atheism is not true. So I'll just go through them and see what you think. I think the first reason why atheism is not true is because Jesus Christ rose from the dead. First of all, in order to establish that Christ rose from the dead, one has to establish whether he was a historical figure. And we have plenty of evidence to know that he was a historical figure, and the bare outlines of his life, historically speaking, can be verified. Again, Pliny's letter helps us to see that the early church in the 1st century was actually believing in that general outline of Jesus living, dying and rising again. It wasn't a story that had developed over like 200-300 years. Tacitus's letter gives us another outline of Christ's life. Josephus's comments give us an outline of his life. Even if we just accepted the bare outlines of his comments, we could argue whether it's been embellished by Christian in the past, but there is a strong argument that there is a core outline in Josephus of the life of ministry of Jesus Christ. So we have these extra biblical sources of different sources, and there are many others that point to a historical Christ. We have the AD 54 passage of Paul in 1 Corinthians 15, which is an early attestation of the life, death and ministry of Christ. So the historical reality of who Christ is not in question. The question is, what facts explain the resurrection of Christ? Is it an illusion? Now, if it was an illusion, if people saw an illusion, that fails, because there were so many appearances of Jesus Christ to so many different types of people that our analysis today of what we know of hallucination doesn't comport with what happened in the time of Christ. Normally hallucinations happen with a particular sort of type of person. It's not really, it doesn't normally go across the whole board of different characters, different situations. So the hallucination theory is out. The idea that the body was snatched away is out, because if that was the case, all the Romans and Jewish people needed to do is show the body, and that would have been at the end of Christianity. So the only real option you've got is that the Lord Jesus actually rose from the dead. You could say Jesus didn't die on a cross, but medical evidence proves that he would have most certainly have died, because of the crucifixion was so ghastly. So there's no real way around it, really. The argument that miracles don't happen is not an argument, because I've gone into this at length, but the issue of contingency, that we don't know how a contingent act interacts with each other. So we came up in science with the issue of probability, that we grade theories on a scale of probability. And if that's the case, the reason for that is because there could be something coming in a contingent act that might upset our information that we never realized. and that means there is a possibility of a miracle. Now, we define a miracle as some would say an act that goes against nature, but that's a bad definition. A miracle is something really that we've not comported in our calculations concerning the possibility of contingent acts. I think that's more of a technical, philosophical and scientific definition that is better and does justice to David Hume's writing and critical reflection there. So that's the resurrection of Christ. The second reason why atheism is wrong is the Bible being the Word of God. Atheists love to point to the Old Testament and say, look, there is genocide here and all that. But when they do that, they fail to realize the contextual nature of the Bible. They fail to get into the context. And they do this lamentably all the time. Tremendous lack of contextual analysis of the Bible. But there are a number of issues that kind of bring out that the Bible is the Word of God. First of all, the Bible was written over a few thousand years. It had a variety of authors from different cultures, and yet it has one message, and it's the message about Jesus Christ. And now, to put that into context, if I try to make a book and I grabbed Shakespeare's work, and I grab Plato, and I grab Aristotle, and I grab Immanuel Kant, and I grab Pushkin, and I grab Flaubert, and I grab poems by Emily Dickinson and poems by Tennyson, and I collected a whole host of writers at different periods of history, in different genres, novels, plays, poems, over say 2,000 years, and then I put it all together, and it had one main message. That would be a miracle, and that's what we see with the Bible. Also, the purity of the Bible. The Bible is actually the most purest book you'll ever read. It doesn't engender any desire to walk in sin, but encourages you to walk in holiness and purity. And it is the most enabling, spiritually revitalizing book you'll ever read. Now, this is not a subjective thing. This is a fact of history. You look at where the Bible goes or has gone. I mean, an example is Charles Darwin himself. There was an evangelistic campaign in his village, and it had a revolutionary impact on his village where he lived. And he wrote a letter to the evangelist and said, your preaching has done more for our village, for our community, than all the actions that we've tried to do, like sort of practical philanthropic work. So that's just an example of how the Bible changes communities. Another example, there was a guy who was shipwrecked on an island with a bunch of thieves and cutthroats and stuff, and it was pretty bad. And the natives there and these thieves and crooks. This is like a couple of 100 years ago, and it looked really bad. There was thieving, there was murders. It was pretty bad. But anyhow, this guy, I'll put the details under another video. I'll make specific a video one day about this. But this guy found a Bible, and he began to teach the people on the island, and it revolutionized the island, and so much so that a British ship came by and found this amazing civilized culture, and it came about because of the Bible. So that's just two examples about why the Bible is the Word of God. I think the third reason why atheism is not true is an understanding of human nature. You see, atheist rhetoric is, they say, well, atheism is just an absence of belief due to a lack of evidence. But it's interesting that when you look at the history of atheism, there is a continual critique against religion. You'll always hear this attack against religion, specifically the Christian faith. So atheism is a bit more than just an absence of belief. It has a variety of rhetorical tools that it uses against Christianity. And one of the things is that it in these rhetorical tools, it kind of sees that the Christian faith, religion, as kind of the big problem of history. An example of that, if you take Dr. Miller's documentary, An Atheist, and you look at his history of atheism, and it's quite clear how even someone as objective as he is as a thinker paints the history of thought as one of rationality against religion, and religion is just the big problem. We sort out religion, and history will move along in much better. But the Bible's teaching is the problem with history is not religion but the human heart. The human heart is fractured. There's something deeply wrong. It's called original sin, but we would say that human beings are deeply flawed. They're fallen from God, they've fallen from grace. They're a noble race, but they are a fallen noble race. Now, if you look at history, it's too simplistic to say that it's been religion has been the problem. But if you look at history, the more complex and more realistic answer is it's the human heart that's been the problem. It's been the human heart. People wanting power, people wanting to control, manipulate. And the Bible's analysis of human nature in history is far more complex and detailed than the atheist. The atheist understanding of history and its problem is too simplistic. And that's where you have the issue of atheists leaving out bits of history that they don't like, that shows their beliefs up for being wrong. So if religion is the problem, why did atheism bring the reign of terror in the French Revolution? If atheism is right, then why did atheism bring about so many killings in Russia and China? And the atheists will work so hard to tell you that this is nothing to do with atheism, what happened in communist China and communist Russia. The heart of these two systems was a materialistic philosophy, which has the idea that there is no God, and basing that you can build a society on a materialist philosophy. Now, atheism, yes, they say it's an absence of belief, but it's also a materialist philosophy of life. So, just on that one little basis, there is a massive connection between communism and atheism. They're rooted in a materialist philosophy, an idea that you can build society without God. Okay? So that's the complexity of history. The Bible is correct in its analysis. The next issue is hypocrisy. The atheist will say, well, we're just looking for evidence and we can't find evidence for God. But there's a kind of lack of being honest and being hypocritical here, because Science doesn't say whether there is a God or not, and yet the atheists will continually try and use science as a way of showing that religion's not true, and trying to pit religion against science when it's just blatantly just not honest to say that. I mean, many scientists of the past, great scientists, were Christians. An obvious example is Newton, but we have Copernicus and many other great, Faraday, many great scientists who were Christians. But the issue is that there is this hypocrisy where atheists will say we just want evidence, but we don't get evidence from Christianity. And you know, the reason is because science shows that there have been no miracles, or science shows that Christianity is not true. But you know, it's not the job of science. Science doesn't arbitrate either way or the other. Science just tells us about phenomena. It doesn't tell about the meaning and purpose of life, or whether there is a miracle or isn't a miracle. All science does is just examine phenomena. The conclusions that we come from that phenomena are our conclusions. That's not the science's job. Science's job is just to examine phenomena and to understand phenomena, but to actually give purpose to our scientific endeavours, or value to our scientific endeavours concerning the issues of religion or not, is not the work of science. So there's a kind of hypocrisy there. You know, science doesn't rule out the possibility of the supernatural. It doesn't. It's not bothered either way. You know, it's not. That's not the issue. But the atheists will continue to bring this straw man argument about science. Science is against religion, and create this false dichotomy, which is just not true. The next issue is reality. In order for a system to actually work, and that we can know whether it's true or not, is if it works in reality. If a system of thought or thinking actually fits reality and works in reality, I think that's the key. Fits and works in reality, because you can have something that works but it doesn't fit reality. So if some ideology or some system of thinking actually fits reality and works within reality, then that will be a test of its veracity and truth. Now here's a big problem with atheist thinking. You see, atheism say that all as atheism is a lack of belief, okay, due to a lack of evidence. A lack of belief in God due to a lack of evidence. Okay, let's just imagine this is right. What does that say about life? What does it say about the world? What does it say about the variety and aspects of life? It doesn't say anything. So there's a big problem there, and I'll just unpack this a little bit more. Take, for example, let's just look at various aspects of life. Number one, we have a world, a creation, right? Number two, we have human beings, and they interrelate to each other. So they have relations. Now, how these human beings relate to each other, they relate to man and woman and children, etc., rich and poor, etc. So there are these aspects of reality that we're seeing. We're seeing creation, we're seeing human beings, we're seeing men, women and children. Now men and women have to survive, so the reality of work. Men and women have to group together, so the reality of cities and community life. These are basically basic social existential realities that we actually see before our very eyes. In a scientific way, we can see that these things exist. So if someone is going to come along with an ideology, it has to fit all that reality. It has to be able to explain all that reality. If it doesn't, then it really is not rooted in reality, and it certainly has no purpose if it doesn't help us to work in that reality. The other aspect is we see history full of bloodbath and murders, etc. We see history full of creativity, invention. We see history full of science and art, and etc., music. We have the reality of the future, how to build a future, what the future is going to be, and each day we move into the future. So these are various aspects of reality. Now, the atheist says, atheism is an absence of belief in God due to a lack of belief. So as an atheist, it doesn't have anything to say about this creation. It doesn't have anything to say about man and woman and relationship between man and woman. It doesn't have anything to say about work. It doesn't have anything to say about society, how society comes together as a community. It doesn't have anything to say about the past. It doesn't have anything to say about the present. It doesn't have anything to say about the future. So atheism just does not fit reality. And it's no good saying it's just an absence of belief, that's all it is. That's not good enough. We have reality, and atheism cannot explain anything of the realities that we see around us. Now, take Christianity. Christianity talks about creation. It talks about the world was created. It talks about creation is not part of us, that creation is separate. Explaining reality, it's not pantheism, it's not materialism, but it explains our relationship between creation and what creation is. It explains who man and woman is and what man and woman are supposed to be doing. It explains the role of children, it explains the role of work, it explains the role of cities and community, it explains the past, it explains the present, it explains the future. So Christianity fits into reality. Now the question is, does it work? Well, the heart of Christianity is love. You will read, if you read the New Testament, and even if you read the Old Testament, love is at the heart. Love is the centre of the Christian faith. Now, I don't know about you, but you should know that love works. That if we build a world on love, that it will survive. It will work. Love is at the heart of everything. That's a value. And Christianity fits into reality, and it works because its message is love. I think the next issue is the reason why atheism is not true is intellectual tools. What I mean by that is, since the Enlightenment, there has been a massive there has been an absolute massive shift in the way we think for the last 200 years we've become more rationalistic, where reason is put above everything else. And so there's been a dichotomy happen between in human beings. The self has been fractured, and the rhetoric has been principally stressing reason, reason, reason. And the problem with that is that as human beings we're not just rational creatures, we are moral creatures, and we are creative creatures. So you can't make a dichotomy between reason, creativity and morality. These three things go together. And so therefore in our intellectual endeavours we tend to look at intellectual issues with just a one-track mind, that the only way to solve a problem is through reason and logic, or the only way to investigate something is by pure reason and logic, which is absolutely fundamental and important, but it's just a very narrow way of looking at reality and life. We don't just look at things purely from reason and logic. We look at things emotionally, and we look at things creatively, we look at things morally. So there are a variety of ways of testing truth. And so if you're going to test something, whether it's true or not, it has to come with the reality of who we are as human beings. It has to fit the epistemology of what we are as human beings. As human beings we are rational, we are moral, we are creative. And to come at an issue just purely from the rational, it's just coming at it from a narrow perspective, because it's denying who we are as human beings. We have to have an epistemology that is much more rounded, that is creative, an epistemology that allows creativity, an epistemology that is personal, that is moral, and an epistemology that is rational. And they all go together. So when we are looking at an issue, it's not just bringing it down to reason and logic. It has to fit these criteria, and Christianity fits that criteria. When we're studying truth, we're not just studying a pure logical inference. We are studying a person, Jesus Christ. And in studying Jesus Christ, the rational faculties are empowered. We use them to investigate who he is. But because he's a person, our emotional and moral faculties are used. And also our creative faculties, in the sense that we have to do the creativity of doing the research and thinking through the issues concerning Christ's life. Studying his teaching involves a creativity in exegesis, creativity in historical analysis, creativity in looking at opposite views. So the Christian epistemology is much more fuller, intellectually rounded, than this dry, barren rationalism that the atheists propound, that really is a dichotomy of and a negation of who we are as human beings. We are rational, moral and creative. And the atheists have failed to pick up on this issue. Atheism is not true due to the issue of objectivity, is my seventh point. The atheist continually goes on and on and on about they haven't got any decent evidence. And they say that's why they don't believe in God, that's why they don't believe in Christianity, because there's no evidence. And you would feel that what it is the atheist comes along and is honest and looks at the evidence, and there isn't really any evidence for God, and so they just reject God outright. And you think, yeah, well, the atheist is being honest, but the fact of the matter is when you read atheist language, atheist rhetoric, listen to atheist debates, atheist lectures, read atheist books, what you find is they hate Christianity. They really do hate Christianity, and they want to destroy Christianity. So on the one hand, we have this rhetoric that we don't believe in Christianity because there is no evidence, but at the same time there is this double-handed issue going on, this Machiavellian kind of scenario where they say, well, we don't believe in Christianity because there's no evidence, but oh, by the way, we can't stand Christianity and we're going to destroy it. And you look at all the videos that are being made on YouTube and it's trying to destroy Christianity. So how can you be objective if that's your aim? How can you really objectively look at evidence if your aim is to destroy Christianity? How can you honestly, openly look at objective information about Jesus if you're not willing to look at things in an objective way when you have an agenda of destroying Christianity? A lot of the other issue why atheism is not true is psychological arguments. If you look at the history of atheism, the principal stock arguments against Christianity have been from a psychological from the psychological point of view. For example, if you look at Spinoza, if you look at David Hume, and then if you go into modern times, Nietzsche, Sigmund Freud, Karl Marx, Bertrand Russell, much of the argumentation from these thinkers and into the present time with Dawkins and Hitchens and many others, basically the argument have been psychological. For example, Freud would say that that the person's sexually backward if they're a Christian. They're looking for a father figure, and they would explain things from his sexual psychology, or take Marx, religion is the opium of the people, as sort of people are psychologically weak and they have to be manipulated by the state, given a dummy with sugar coated on it. You read it in David Hume's work and Spinoza's work. They have this clear analysis, very similar to Marx, of that religion is a control mechanism where people are weak and they're sentimental and they just can't deal with life's problems. So there are these stock arguments that have gone throughout history with atheism concerning Christianity on a psychological basis. But these psychological arguments don't fit reality. If you go back to the early church, you look at the Apostle Paul, what is the psychology of why he allowed himself to suffer so much in preaching the gospel? You can't. No atheist argument, psychological argument, can explain the life of the Apostle Paul. It breaks down. And you can go throughout the history of the church. Why did Latimer and Ridley get burned at the stake for believing the gospel? Why did Adonai Judson get hung upside down and suffer terribly for being a missionary? Why did Hudson Taylor go to China and give his life for mission? Why did C.T. Studd, a famous cricketer, give up his life to be a missionary? Give up his being a cricketer, world famous cricketer, to be a missionary? Why did Jackie Pullinger go to Hong Kong to minister to the many drug addicts there? Why? And what you find is Christianity doesn't. You can't put Christianity in some kind of psychological argument. You know, there have been doctors, nurses, poor people, rich people, drug addicts, non-addicts, wealthy, not wealthy, all different types of people, different types of social background, have all believed in Jesus Christ. So you can't put some kind of psychological analysis, because the reality is that there's such a variety of different people becoming Christians from different societies that it's not possible. So one simplistic psychological theory that a Freud or that a Hitchens, that a Dawkins or whoever comes up with just fails the reality test. I mean, an example is psychological argument that atheists use is that Christianity is anti-intellectual, doesn't have any evidence, and it's a complete blatant lie and fails in the reality test. Jonathan Edwards was the great American philosopher of all time, but he was a Christian, and even today you've got Alvin Plantinga, who's a great philosopher, Christian thinker. You've had Cornelius Van Til, great thinkers, I mean world famous thinkers who were Christians, who were willing to come up with arguments and evidence for the Christian faith. It's just a complete lack of understanding the reality of the situation. So psychological theories that atheists have used have been the main stock arguments against Christianity, and they fail, not taking into consideration the full reality of the case. Then finally, the issue of morality. This is the big problem with atheists. They will go to the Old Testament and attack the Old Testament. Which is interesting, because from their own perspective, from an evolutionary perspective, their beliefs are just social norms. So if that's the case, why get uptight critiquing the Old Testament? They were just, from an evolutionary atheist perspective, they're just social norms of that particular time. So, and who's to say that your social norms now are more superior to the social norms of the Old Testament? Who arbitrates? What the arbitration shows is that atheists actually have an inbuilt morality. They know what's right and wrong, and that instinctive they know what's right and wrong is a direct contradiction of their evolutionary morality, because evolution says that morality is developed over time. But if that's the case, how come atheists have an instinct for what is right and what is wrong, which is nothing to do with social norms? But on the issue, on another issue, is that nature doesn't say anything about morality, and yet atheists are materialist de facto. And if they are materialist de facto and they try to get their morality from nature, well, nature doesn't say anything about morality, so you can't make the intellectual jump from the is ought. Now, David Hume and Wittgenstein have made this quite clear. Atheists have tried to get out of this issue by saying Christians have the problem with the is ought. We don't have a problem with the is ought, because we have a realist epistemology, and if you have a realist epistemology and you have a God who is upholding all contingent acts, there is no problem in moving to the is ought. That's not the issue. The is ought issue is simply this: nature doesn't say anything about morality. You're trying to build morality from nature, and you can't do it. So atheism is an amoral system leading to immorality, because you can contemplate as an atheist the possibility of doing immoral acts, as a possibility in your ethical system. So you might say, well, my ethical system is a Sam Harris issue, where an ethical issue is not causing pain to someone. But that criteria could be that if you wanted sex with a horse, so long as the horse doesn't have any pain, it's a possibility to have sex with a horse. So it's a ridiculous scenario. As atheists, you have no real moral standards, because you can actually contemplate things that are so unethical, it's unbelievable, within such a system, and it's so contradictory, it's just ridiculous. And then the final issue is what I would call the general particulars argument. And this is the final issue that why I feel atheism is not correct. And it's on the issue of the finite and the infinite. We are finite human beings, okay? And we look at life and we try to come up with some kind of understanding of life and meaning of life. But because we're finite, whatever system of thought we come up with, whether it be Hegel, whether it be Kant, whether it be David Hume, because we are finite, it will never be able to fully grasp the infinite complexity of the particulars. So you have particulars in life. You have family, you have man, woman, children, you have society, you have villages, towns, you have material objects, you have all these various particulars, okay? And if you come at it from a finite perspective and try to work out a meaning and a purpose for all these particulars, you end up finding you can't do it, because there's so much complexity and so much to work out that from a finite perspective you just can't cover all the angles. So that's why we've had Plato comes along, and then he's knocked down, and you have another philosopher come along, and you'll have Rousseau, or you'll have Kant, and then you'll have Spinoza, or you'll have a David Hume, and philosophers come and they go and they make their comments about the particulars, but they're doing it from a finite perspective, and because they do it from a finite perspective, someone else can come along and debunk what they're saying, because the philosopher before the other philosopher was finite, limited, and couldn't cover all the angles. So in order for all of the particulars to get a complete meaning of it, complete understanding of it, of how it, what its meaning and purpose is, you have to have the infinite comment on the finite in order for all the angles to be covered. Okay? So because atheism is from a finite perspective, it can never really cover all the angles where we can actually get to some grips with the ultimate meaning of life. It's never going to happen. Like I said, we had Karl Marx, for example. Marx goes, and then we have Nietzsche, and Nietzsche goes, and then we have a Wittgenstein, and Wittgenstein goes, then we have a Bertrand Russell, and he goes, and then we have the feminists, and they come and go, and then we have the neo-colonialists, and we have Foucault, and we have Derrida, and Deleuze, and it goes on and on and on, because the finite can't work out the particulars, ultimately speaking. So we need the finite to comment, to explain the infinite, we need the infinite to comment and explain and cover all the angles of the particulars. That's where the Bible comes in. The Bible is the finite, the infinite, commentating on the particulars. That is the only way out of this vicious circle of somebody's ideas come, they get knocked down, somebody else comes with ideas and they get knocked down. To get some certainty in the historical perspective of where we are as humans. And the infinite speaks about love, and that is the heart of covering all the particulars. So thank you for listening. Those are my 10 positions on atheism. And why am I a Christian? Take care now and God bless.